Well, welcome again, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar for the Justice Innovation Prize. My name is Talia Gibbous. I am a program officer with CARET. We are the agency that is supporting dream.org for this prize. We also power the website and the platform that you will use to submit your applications. I'm going to just start off with some quick housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded and it will be available on the news and updates page of the prize website later on this week. We will also share it via email to those of you who have registered for the prize. Just to give you a sense of how we will be allotting our time together, we have reserved the majority of our time over the next hour for your questions. In just a moment, Michael Bernarding, Justice Innovation Senior Manager for dream.org, will welcome you and provide a quick overview of the prize. After that, I will do a quick walkthrough of the prize website with my colleague, Ethan Matthews, and then my colleague, Christabel Villena, will help open it up for your questions. So as questions come up, please type them into the questions box, and we will answer as many as we can within our allotted time. Before we move on, some very important dates to keep in mind. The deadline to register for the Justice Innovation Prize is in 5 weeks on Wednesday, April 5th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Please note that you must register in order to submit an application. We are also planning an additional pre-application webinar the week after that registration deadline. The sign-up link for that webinar will be shared with all registered applicants shortly after the registration deadline. If questions come to mind after we have wrapped up our webinar, you can always feel free to email us at questions@justiceinnovationprize.org. And with that, I'm very pleased to virtually hand things over to Michael Bernarding of dream.org for some additional words of welcome.
Thanks, Talia. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and for your interest in the Justice Innovation Prize. As Talia mentioned, I am the Justice Innovation Senior Manager with dream.org on our Justice team. So dream.org is composed of 3 major program areas. Dream Green is our climate and environmental policy, green jobs, and clean tech program. We have Dream Tech, where we help to move more underrepresented folks into the tech sector through job training, job placement, cohorts, and scholarships. And then Dream Justice, which this initiative falls under. And Dream Justice is formerly known, some of you may know it as Cut 50, that had the goal to have the US prison population by 50% within 10 years. So Dream Justice, with about 18 months ago, start looking for other ways beyond our traditional policy and advocacy reform work, which we've had a lot of great success at both the federal and state levels of government, advancing legislation and reform for the criminal legal system, but also know that there have to be other ways to dismantle and disrupt the prison industry. And so we launched the Justice Innovation Program in order to start working on building out the ecosystem to do that. And that took shape with 3 core initiatives. The first was our Justice Tech Accelerator, and then our Justice Innovation Fellowship. And then the third, what we're here to talk about today, is the Justice Innovation Prize. If you happen to want more information about our other initiatives, you can reach out to me. We can put my email, it's michael.bernarding@dream.org in the chat. So we launched the Justice Innovation Prize. We started planning it last year. We launched it in January. And really the purpose of the prize is we know that we need to find other really transformative, bold, and innovative ways to end mass incarceration. And we know that those ideas are going to come from the people really on the front lines, the communities and the people that are the most impacted, that by the system, have been most harmed by the systems, and can help scale those ideas locally and then nationally. Everything we do at dream.org, we want to do at systems level change or be working to get to systems level change. And so that's why we want scale is one of the biggest, one of the 4 criteria, right, for the Justice Innovation Prize, so that we are able to find them from you, all of you, put those ideas forward. in order to do so. So look forward to answering any of your questions and hopefully reading through applications. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. Now I will provide a quick overview of the Justice Innovation Prize website and the process to participate. And first we'll start with talking about how to register. And you will hear us reiterating this registration deadline a number of times. If you have not already, we do encourage you to complete the registration process as soon as possible. It is required in order for you to be able to go on to submit an application by that application deadline. Registration is very simple. So if you go to the upper right-hand corner of any page on the website and click on the button that counts down the number of days to register, from there you will be instructed to create and confirm your account. And you'll be asked to confirm your email address, and then you'll be able to log in. You can see on your screen what that login page looks like. And once you log in, you will have access to the platform that you see on your screen. And you'll also be prompted to submit some basic information about you and your organization so that we can better understand our registered community. Important note, you will not receive an email confirmation of your registration after you've completed that profile. If you are able to log in and access that online platform that you just saw and the forums, that means you've registered properly for the challenge. So that is a quick overview of how to register. It is very, very quick and easy. From there, this prize, like all of the prizes that we run, is really rooted in the values of openness, transparency, and fairness. It's important to us to be sure that everyone who registers and applies for this opportunity knows exactly what is expected of them, when and how they're going to be assessed, and who will be evaluating the proposals they put forward. So we've built this website as an instructional guide to help you understand that process. So a great place to start as you are learning more is to look at the Justice Innovation Prize application. So before you even register, you can go to the application page, and here you can see the full text of the application, all of the questions, the prompts, the word count limits, and the requirements. So you can see this application has several sections. It does require a brief video and a number of narrative questions. So we very highly encourage that you read over this in full to get a sense of what is required of you should you decide to move forward and submit an application. But we've put this forward so that anyone can see in advance what that application comprises. So once you've read over that application, you should have a pretty strong sense of what you will need to do in order to apply. The next question is how this application will be evaluated. And so on the challenge website, under scoring process, you can also see the full scoring rubric, and this will be used during two evaluation phases. The first is the peer-to-peer review process, which we'll talk about in a moment, as well as the evaluation panel. So this same rubric will be used during both peer-to-peer review and the evaluation panel to comment on the submissions. And Michael mentioned one of the scoring criteria. There are 4 in total: innovative, impactful, scalable, and feasible. And you'll see that the rubric lays out the 4 criteria as well as a prompt that details what each of these traits means in context. And each trait also will be given a score between 0 and 5. And you can toggle back and forth between the scoring ranges for any one of these traits. And you'll see as you do that, there are phrases that appear in that center box, and that provides further detail on what a high versus a low score means for each of these particular traits for the purposes of this particular prize. This rubric really defines what DREAM.org is looking for. It goes into great detail about the elements that would comprise a strong proposal. And so we really encourage everyone to familiarize themselves with it, as it really should be a guidepost to you as you think through what kind of proposal you might want to put forward and then submit your application. From there, I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about the evaluation process. So as I mentioned, it will take place in multiple phases. So following the application deadline, all eligible submissions will first move into peer-to-peer review. And peer-to-peer review is a unique aspect of this prize. During that phase, every lead applicant will be asked to score and comment on 5 applications from other organizations using that same scoring rubric that we just looked at. This is a requirement of participation, so all applicants must participate in this step, reviewing and providing feedback on 5 other applications in order to remain eligible for this opportunity. Once peer-to-peer review is complete, a subset of applications will move forward to the next phase of review, which is the evaluation panel. And during this phase, applications will be reviewed again by 5 different members of the expert review panel. You can see the current roster of the review panel members on our website, and there are more that may be added in the coming weeks. But you will receive scores on your submissions from 5 of these individuals, and you will also receive written feedback. So for both the peer-to-peer review phase and the evaluation panel phase, you will receive the anonymous written feedback from the folks who are reviewing your application. And so the evaluation panel members will be asked to provide some pretty in-depth comments to justify the scores that they put for each of the traits. And what we have found is that this written feedback that you will receive is really just a great aspect of participating in the challenges that we run, so that even if you are not selected as a finalist, you do ultimately walk away with valuable feedback that you can use to refine your ideas, perhaps seek other funding or expanded support. So that process brings up another common question, which is, what do we do to ensure that the process is fair? And so we also have a webpage that's dedicated specifically to our normalization process. So I mentioned that in the peer-to-peer phase, each application will be scored by 5 peers. And then in the evaluation panel phase, each application will be reviewed by 5 judges. So this means, of course, that not every applicant and not every review panel member can look at every application. And what we do is we make sure that you are not disadvantaged if by chance you were assigned someone who is naturally a harsher grader versus someone else was reviewed by someone who tends to be a little bit more lenient in their scores. So in brief, after all the scores and comments are complete, the scores are rescaled and normalized to account for that natural differentiation between individuals in terms of whether they tend to score more harshly and more leniently. So again, if you go to the menu and click on the link that says fairness underscoring process, we go into a fair amount of detail about how this works. A few other features on the website that I wanted to be sure to point out to you. First, let's quickly take a look at the rules page. And here you can read about the legal stipulations that govern your participation, the full eligibility criteria, as well as the detailed terms and conditions. And we also have a pretty detailed timeline page that goes through each phase of this prize. And there you will find the specific dates for peer-to-peer review, as well as when the evaluation panel will be taking place, so on and so forth. So this is a good place to bookmark as you go through this process, just as a reminder of what will be happening when. One last thing that I will mention, if you have not already, we also encourage you to take a brief tour of the applicant readiness tool on the website. So if you click on applicant readiness at the top, it just lists out a number of brief questions that will help you better align, determine whether or not the proposal that you have in mind is aligned with the goals of this particular challenge. Other areas to keep in mind, we have a news and updates page on the website. That is where we'll be posting the recording of the recording of this webinar, as well as any updates throughout the life cycle of this prize. We also have a pretty full list of frequently asked questions. We encourage you to read over all of those And we will be updating that list of frequently asked questions depending on the questions that we receive via email, as well as some of the things that might come up on this webinar and that pre-application webinar we'll be hosting after the registration deadline. All right, I think that is it for my overview. So we're now ready to move on to the Q&A portion of the webinar. So please continue to add your questions to the questions box, and we will get to as many as we can. One quick note before we dive into questions, in order to ensure fairness, we are not able to provide specific guidance or feedback on your proposed solution, so please be sure to keep that in mind as you ask your questions. And with that, I'm very happy to let Christabel Villena, my colleague here at Carrot, take things away and read these questions out loud. Christabel.
Thank you so much, Talia. So first question, can individuals participate?
It's a great question. I'm happy to start with this one. So if you go to the rules page, you will note that each team, and just as a sidebar, teams are highly encouraged for this prize. Each team must designate an eligible lead applicant that will be responsible for administering the grant award if they are awarded through this prize. Individuals are able to register and submit an application. However, Justice Innovation Prize funding cannot ultimately go directly to an individual. So individual participants must plan on establishing or partnering with an eligible organizational entity by the time awards are selected in order to receive funding. And that could look like a fiscal sponsor organization or another organizational partner. But if you are an individual and you're planning on submitting an application, please be sure to keep that in mind, that you must have an established organizational entity by the time awards are announced to receive those funds. Also note that individuals can serve as partners on an application submitted by an eligible lead applicant. So in short, if you are an individual and you want to participate, you should begin thinking about your capacity to establish an organizational entity or plan on partnering with an organization now, as you will not be able to receive funding otherwise. If you have any other questions about that, as always, please feel free to email us at questions@justiceinnovationprize.org.
Great, thank you, Talia. Next question. My organization is a current DREAM.org grantee. May we apply?
Thanks, Christabel. This is Michael. I'll take that. So yes, current or former grantees may apply as long as the projects represent significantly different concepts than those that we already funded previously.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Next question. My proposed budget is less than $250,000. May I still apply?
This is Talia. I'm happy to take that one. So your budget for the application must equal $250,000. You actually will not be able to submit your application if that budget table does not equal $250,000. If your project will cost more than that, there is a space on the application to note this, and you will also be asked to explain whether you have other sources of funds committed and where they are from. If your project is less than $250,000, you have between now and the application deadline to revise your project scope to make it equal to the full $250,000. And as always, we mentioned this before, but the scoring rubric should really be a guide here, and we encourage you to refer to that throughout to understand the full scope of the kinds of projects that we're looking for.
Great, next question. Do you all have a preference for types of programs, i.e. education, mental health, etc.?
Michael, I'm happy to start here if you want, and then if you want to add additional notes, does that sound good?
Yep, sure.
Great. So this particular prize is open to a range of programmatic types. Really, the goal is to find projects that have a novel and bold vision for how to tackle the cycle of mass incarceration in the United States. We're looking for core ideas that are unique and or adapt existing work in unconventional ways. And really, above all, they should be making lasting change in the lives of individuals, their families, and their communities, and the communities that are most affected by the criminal justice system. And you'll also see in the scoring rubric that there's great interest in those that have the potential to adapt to varying geographic and political contexts. So there's a broad range of programs that might fall within what I just described. But again, you really want to take a look at that scoring rubric and see the extent to which your project aligns with the criteria that are laid out there. Michael, anything you wanted to add there?
I might just add just a couple points that might help. So I think when we're thinking about this, we realize that there's no one single thing, right, that's going to end mass incarceration in the United States, that there needs to be a very, a large scope of solutions and ideas to transform this space. And so when we think about even just our Justice Tech Accelerator, we had 10 companies. Majority were all justice impacted founders who ran those companies that went through, and they all worked at a different point inside, and kind of that journey, if you will, like right from the criminal legal system, from, arrest, diversion to reentry to record clearing. So everything in between, all of that in between, we're open to those ideas and such.
Thanks, Pievos. So can an organization submit more than one application?
I'm happy to take this one. So a lead organization or an individual can serve as the lead on only one application. That said, an organization can serve as a partner on a team for multiple applications, provided that each of those applications proposes a separate and distinct solution. If you're an individual submitting an application, you may not serve as a partner on another application. There's another quick note here that if you are part of a larger organization that has regional or location-specific branches, or if you are a department or school or nonprofit that is based within a college or university, each of those sub-branches can register and submit separate applications as a lead organization. But again, the proposed solutions have to be distinct and separate. There should be no overlap between team members. And the purpose of this is really to ensure that each team is concentrating their best effort into a single application. So we do encourage you to select a single project that best represents your organization's ability to deliver a solution that meets the scoring criteria. And all of this is laid out in detail on the rules page. So if you have any more questions about that, that is the best place to start.
All right, we have a question about peer-to-peer review. I will be the lead applicant, but is it possible to designate a different team member to do the peer-to-peer review?
Yes, and just a quick note here that we are also planning a full webinar that will go over peer-to-peer review in detail once we get to that phase in the process. But the short answer is yes. So you will be asked to designate a member of your team to complete those reviews. And some things to keep in mind is that we ask that whichever team member is selected to do it be a programmatic expert on your team who is very familiar with the application and the proposed solution, and that the same team member completes the reviews for all 5 of the assigned submissions. And when we get into the peer-to-peer review webinar, we'll have a lot more information about the approximate length of time that we think this will take. So know that all those details will be covered in detail in a later session. But really, some things to think about right now are who on your team might be that programmatic expert who has the capacity to complete the reviews during the time allotted. The timeline of the peer-to-peer stage is listed on the website, so you can take a look at that, and really think through like who has the capacity and the genuine interest in learning about some of the ideas that are put forth by others.
Great. So budget question. Can the $250,000 cover wages of the person heading up the project?
So this is Talia. The answer is yes. And I'll also just note that the rules page does go over in a fair amount of detail what cannot be allocated, what the activities that funds cannot be allocated to, excuse me. So there is a fair amount of flexibility here in how you put together your budget, but there are some things that are prohibited, including loans or microloans, as well as lobbying activities. So those are listed in detail on the rules page. And as always, if any other questions pop up about that, feel free to send us an email.
All right, a question about partners. So if we are applying and multiple partner orgs are involved, are there any restrictions in terms of how the funding is split? For example, does a primary lead organization need to receive 51% or more of the funding?
I'm happy to start here, and then Michael, you can also jump in if you have additional information. So subgranting is allowed. So if you are the lead organization and you're partnering, then you are welcome to disperse those funds from the lead organization to other partners in order to implement the proposed solution. In terms of any required split, I'm not aware of whether or not there is anything specific there. Michael, I'm not sure if you know, and if not, we can also just be sure to follow up via email once we get clarity on that.
Yeah, I have no specifics on that.
Okay.
We can...
Yeah, so we will be sure to get this clarified, and we can follow up via email with the individual who asked this particular question.
All right, sounds good. Next question, are there possible conflicts of interest which may deny projects from being accepted?
I'm happy to start here. I kind of off the top of my head, I'm not aware of any broad conflicts of interest which would deny a project from being accepted. We do have multiple steps in place to make sure that conflicts of interest are addressed during the peer-to-peer review process, as well as during the evaluation panel phase. So all of the judges will be asked to confirm that they do not have conflicts of interest with any of the applications that they are assigned. But other than that, there is nothing else that I could think of that might constitute a conflict of interest here. Michael, anything that you can think of?
No, you mentioned the judges, so I don't have any other top of mind.
Great. Next question about use of funds. So can you talk in more detail about the prohibition of political activities? What is the line? Would the grant being spent on an educational campaign itself that would encourage others to be politically engaged on this issue qualify?
This is a great question, and I would refer back to the rules here and note that advocacy, so while lobbying activities are prohibited, advocacy activities advocacy activities are generally permissible, but this is really a question that we encourage each organization seek out individual legal counsel on to better understand that distinction between lobbying and advocacy. And that would really depend on the specifics of your own proposed project.
Great. Next question, can an incarcerated person apply?
So I'm happy to start here. As we talked at the beginning, individuals are welcome to register and submit an application, but will need to have an established organizational partner by the time awards are distributed in order to receive that funding. I'm not sure off the top of my head whether or not there would be restrictions in partnering with organizations for an incarcerated individual. But Michael, happy for you to jump in if you have any additional thoughts here or information.
Yeah, so my immediate response would want to circle back just for some clarity on this would be, I don't see any of like saying that why they would be prohibited outside of restrictions of, you know, their facility or such of being able to do so. But yeah, they would need to have that partnership organization. But being incarcerated in and of itself would not be a disqualifying factor.
Great. Question about location. So just to be sure, there's no limit to region of the country.
That is correct. Projects do have to be based within the United States. And you'll also see in the scoring rubric that there is particular interest in projects that can scale across multiple geographies and political contexts. But beyond that, there's no particular limit in terms of the region.
All right, next question. Can the Justice Innovation Prize be used to fund a pilot program or proof of concept?
Absolutely, yes. This prize is seeking groundbreaking ideas and welcomes early stage concepts. But there are some things to keep in mind. You do want to make sure that you meet the criteria that are laid out in the scoring rubric. You also need to be sure that you can have a project that can be implemented within 12 months of funding. And so you'll see in the scoring rubric that there is a balance between innovation and feasibility. So that is something you'll want to keep in mind for pilot programs. And there is no requirement that you have formal studies that validate the proposed approach, but teams will have to clearly articulate why they believe the project will work. And you are welcome to include things like formal or informal studies or observations or other indicators of change as defined by the impacted communities. And you can also include references to external sources in your application.
Great. And can you remind us, please, how many total awards? It was one winner at $250,000, and how many $50,000 finalists?
Yeah, no worries at all. I'm happy to clarify this. So there will be ultimately three $250,000 awards and 5 finalists, and each of those finalists will receive $50,000.
Great. Next question. Do you consider intersectional projects, such as projects that address mass incarceration at intersections of migrant detention?
Michael, do you want to start on this one, or do you want me to jump in?
I can start. I think that the focus of the Justice Innovation Prize is ending mass incarceration. I think we would be open to seeing if there's, an interesting way that is put together, that or other, intersections, of course. But the focus is mass incarceration within the United States.
And I would just add, as we said, as we stressed throughout, that the scoring rubric does go into a lot of detail on ultimately what this project is looking for. So please be sure to read over that in detail. And that should also help provide some additional guidance and clarity.
Great. Next question, can we be proactive by reaching youth of formerly incarcerated individuals?
I'm happy to start here, and I think I maybe need a little bit more information from the person who's asking this question. But again, there is broad latitude in terms of the type of project that you put forward, and And there is also definitely openness and interest to have projects that are focused on not just individuals who are currently incarcerated, but also the communities that are impacted by mass incarceration. So there's a fair amount of flexibility there, and again, just encourage you to take a look at that scoring rubric, as well as the applicant readiness tool to determine whether or not this might be a good fit for you.
Great. And is there a time frame to spend the award?
Yes, it is a 12-month time frame, so a 1-year project period.
Thank you, Talia. And I think that takes us to the end of the questions so far, but please continue to add them if you have any.
Thank you so much, Christabel. Wait for more questions to come in. I'll just start with a few reminders. If additional questions pop to mind after you sign off, you can reach us at questions@justiceinnovationprize.org. And that registration deadline, very important, is Wednesday, April 5th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and you are required to register in order to be able to proceed to submit an application. And we are recording this webinar, and the recording will be available to registrants via email. We will also post it on the website under News and Updates. And if there are...
We do have more that came in.
Yep.
Yes. And if you do have questions that are very specific to your project, don't hesitate to email us at thequestions@, and we'll be sure to respond to you. So next question, are there budget limits for the organization?
This is Talia. I don't believe that there are, though the rules do specify that applicants must demonstrate the financial capacity of the lead organization to carry out the project and appropriately manage any award. So that is something to keep in mind. But technically, there is no minimum threshold in terms of, or maximum threshold in terms of the size of the organization.
Great. And can your lead applicant be someone who will no longer be with the organization during the grant term?
So I'm assuming here by lead applicant, you're referring to the registrant. And so, yes, that's not ideal. You would just want to be sure that your team has the email address and password associated with the account. Same goes for primary and secondary contact, which you are asked to put forth on the registration form. So if those contacts change, if someone leaves during the course of the project, you just want to be sure to be in touch with us so that we can update that information and make sure that all of the email reminders are going to the right place. So as we move through the different phases of this prize, email reminders will be going to the registrant email address, as well as to the primary and secondary contact. So, and it is very important, obviously, that those reminders are received by the appropriate people. So that is something to keep in mind as you think about who you'll be putting down on those forms.
Right. Is there a preferred focus on state prisons or federal prisons and not jails?
I can take that. There's not a preferred focus on any of them. I think all of those systems are impacted by mass incarceration and across the United States. So your project could work with or focus on either of them, a local, state, or federal, as long as the case is made that it would be scaled beyond proof of concept or demonstration period.
Thank you, Michael. So what if your project requires new policy to be introduced to affect system change and thus would have lobbying associated? Would that project be ineligible?
I can take it. I wouldn't say that it would be automatically ineligible, but there are rules between, again, advocacy and lobbying that would need to be adhered to. So that's where, you know, kind of advice of counsel on the expenditures and how the lead organization would manage that appropriately in line with IRS rules. It also goes to just thinking of the other criteria of feasibility, that if you know, just to consider feasibility, getting a policy change done within a 1-year project, right, to implement that project and how feasible that would be. So one more thing to consider.
Great. A budget question. Is there a limit for indirect cost rates?
This is Talia. I was just trying to look this up. I don't believe that we have one specified, but if this, if you could please send me an email, I just want to double confirm. So again, the person who asked that question, you can email me at questions@justiceinnovationprize.org, and we will double confirm, but I believe the answer is no. So yeah, more to come on that one.
Okay. Do you have to disperse a portion of the funds if awarded to those listed as partners, or is that simply optional?
This is Talia. My understanding is that that is optional. It is not a requirement. You have the flexibility to subgrant if you need to, if that makes sense for your project, but it is not firmly required.
All right. And what will reporting requirements be? And will there be check-ins?
That is a great question. There will be a separate grant agreement that the awardees enter into with stream.org. Michael, I'm not sure if you're able to speak to any specific check-ins that would be required as part of that process.
Yeah, so there won't be like quarterly formal required check-ins. There'll be a brief midpoint evaluation, or not evaluation, report, very simple, and then an end of project report, I believe within 60 days of the end, 60 or 90 days with in the end date of the project, but not overly burdensome.
A clarifying question around scaling. So what is the meaning again behind scaled beyond?
So we would look at
Might
scale.
need more information. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, this is Michael. So we look at scale. Again, as Talia mentioned, you can toggle back and forth on that criteria to see, how we're measuring that and what we're looking at. But beyond the geography, initial population, the first population or to expanded geographies, and then potentially system or nationwide.
Thank you, Michael. And I think this question was answered. So Talia, if we'd like to clarify further, if a formerly incarcerated person can lead a project for a prize submission.
Yes, so if they otherwise meet the eligibility requirements, and again, if you are an individual who does not have a current affiliation with an organization, just a reminder that you will need to have an organizational entity established by the time funds are awarded in order to actually receive those funds.
Yeah, I would just follow up with, yes, absolutely, a formerly incarcerated person. The justice team here at dream.org, I believe 90% of our team, we are justice impacted individuals. So we live that every day within our organization.
Wonderful. There is a question here. I don't know, Talia, if this is enough information. The question around is advocacy funded or just programmatic efforts? I know you touched on this again, but maybe perhaps to clarify once more.
Yes, so per the rules, advocacy activities are permissible, provided that they don't violate some of the other prohibited uses of awards funds that are listed in the review, in the rules.
Okay, and then a question that we typically get is how many applications do we normally obtain?
Well, I'm happy to start here. This is the first time the Justice Innovation Prize has been offered, so we don't, as it's the first time, we don't have a historical track record to benchmark against, but are looking forward to fully robust participation for this prize. It's really a wonderful opportunity.
Great, one more question. So how soon after award decision does the awarded entity obtain the funding?
So we will, there's the first round for the 5 semifinalists, right, of the $50,000 planning grant. And then there's the final, obviously, the 3 $250,000 awards. All of the award agreements and checks cut, if you will, or transferred through within 30 days.
Great, and that takes us to the end of the questions so far.
Fabulous. It seems like we did receive one more.
I see, yes. How many lead applicants will be selected for the peer-to-peer review?
Yeah, great question. So as I mentioned, we don't have, this is the first time that the prize has been offered. We don't have a historical benchmark of the number of applications to be received. So all of the applications that are received by the deadline and that pass administrative review, and administrative review is our first check to just ensure that the submitted applications comply with the rules and meet the eligibility criteria. All of the applications who are eligible and pass administrative review in that way will proceed to peer-to-peer review.
We have a couple more questions coming in. Tell me more about the video submission. What are you looking for in more detail?
Sure, I'm happy to start with this one. So as part of the application, you are required to submit a video that captures your project and describes why it should be funded. It really should not be a professionally produced video. It is totally acceptable for it to be shot on a smartphone. Essentially what you will do is you will create it, you will upload it onto YouTube, and then include the link in your application. The goal here really is just to provide you an opportunity to showcase your idea and your passion for the idea in a succinct format that's different than the written proposal. We do recommend doing things like taking the opportunity to introduce yourself and your organization, as well as the other members of your team, and just briefly explain your project and what makes it unique, and the impact that it will make, and really, try to take the opportunity to connect with your audience, with the people who will be assessing the application. But again, it does not need to be professionally produced. It should be brief. In fact, if it's more than 90 seconds, your application might be deemed ineligible. But it is really just an opportunity to provide, to convey your idea in a way that's different from the written text that you'll be providing in your narrative responses.
All right, and next question is, will each awardee need to set up and submit a spreadsheet displaying allocated dispersed funds during the year of implementation?
So I'm happy to start here just in terms of what is listed on the application. So the actual budget that is listed on the application is pretty high level. So you want to be sure to include enough information that those who are assessing the application can get a good sense of how you're planning on spending the $250,000. But you'll see that the budget table itself is pretty simple. You have a line item to describe the cost category and description, and then the total amount. In terms of reporting back on funds once you've been awarded, Michael, I'm not sure if you have any additional details on what will be required at this stage.
Not like a detailed report to format it to share. I would just say that the expenditures report, again, they're not designed to be overly burdensome or complicated. They're simple, few pages, high level numbers, outcomes, and learnings and such. Won't need to send in a QuickBooks file, just to be clear, with that level of detail.
Great. And a related question, is there a preference for how you'd like to see the funds spent? For example, will allocating funds toward general operating be frowned upon?
I'm happy to start here. So you want to be sure that, again, you provide enough detail in the budget that folks can get a very good understanding of how you're planning on using the funds. Beyond what is listed in the rules, there are no specific prohibitions against beyond what is listed in the rules. There are no other specific fund categories that are fully prohibited. But you do want to be sure that you are fully and succinctly explaining how we'll be using the funds towards the implementation of the project, and that that might, depending on the nature of your project, that might include some general operating costs. And I'll also point out that the scoring rubric is also instructive here. The criteria around feasibility, just making sure that the costs that are being proposed are in line with the project itself. But again, beyond those prohibited funds in the rules, you do have some freedom here in terms of what you wish to put forward.
All right, I think that's the end of the questions at this point.
All righty. I did see just a question came in asking if the presentation will be available. Yes, this is recorded, and we will be posting the recording on news and updates and sending it out to everyone who has registered via email. You can also share it with any of your other team members who maybe were not able to attend this morning. All right, and if there are no other questions, We're almost at our time. Oh, I did see. Looks like there is one more that came in.
Yes, a clarifying question around, so do you want to see funds that directly affect the clients versus administration?
So I would refer to the scoring rubric here. One of the criteria is impactful. And so here, really looking to make sure that the project will make lasting change in the lives of individuals, their families, and the communities most affected by the criminal justice system. So you really want to make sure that the impact on those who are affected by the criminal justice system comes through in both the narrative sections of the application as well as the budget.
One more question around the video. Since we're not professionals at video, is it okay if 92 seconds are submitted for the video? Or should we email this question?
We do ask that you limit it to 90 seconds or less.
And if we have time for one more question, for youth contractors, will allowing youth who are impacted by incarceration of any type to be paid through this opportunity be allowed?
I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be, but Michael, please type in if you feel differently.
Yeah, I don't think that would be a prohibited expense.
Okay, and then is the provision of funding for stackable credentials considered a scholarship or microloan?
I think we would need a little bit more information here in order to answer that question. So please email us at questions@justiceinnovationprize.org, and we will be able to provide a little bit more guidance there. And with that, I think we are at our time. Thank you so much, everybody, for submitting such really, really great questions. We really appreciate it. And more questions are welcome to us via email at questions@justiceinnovationprize.org. Please remember that registration deadline, Wednesday, April 5th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We will be sharing the recording of this webinar. Really appreciate your time this morning. Really looking forward to your participation. Michael, any additional closing remarks you'd like to add?
No, thank you all very much. Really looking forward to your participation and applications. Thank you.
Thanks again, everybody. Very much appreciate it.